This is Dayton Mayor Nan Whaley, and you are listening to Carry As You Climb, the podcast that shares the stories of amazing women leaders. This week, we're talking to Maura Keefe, the former Chief of Staff to U.S. Senator Jeanne Shaheen. Since we have talked, she has left the Senate to start her own firm called Keefe Strategies. Well, we're really excited, Maura, to have you here with us today. We're actually in D.C., so we came to visit D.C., and so glad that you took time to come and talk to our newly formed podcast here.
Well, thanks for having me. It's always fun to get a little break at the end of a long week, so I appreciate it.
Thank you, Maura. So I know a lot about you because you're considered one of the great, amazing political leaders in the Democratic Party as the Chief of Staff to the great Senator from New Hampshire, Jeanne Shaheen. But tell me a little bit more about like how you got started and decided you want to do politics. I mean, you're from New Hampshire, so
Right.
It is like where everything is decided very early
Yep.
on in partisan politics. I'm sure that had a piece of it.
It did, and I come from a very political family. So my father actually had the same job I do in the
Wow.
early 1960s for a senator from New Hampshire, Senator Tom McIntyre. And while I never planned on following in his footsteps, as a family that lived in New Hampshire, we were steeped in Democratic politics. At some point, I started getting involved in campaigns and eventually wound up working on Capitol Hill on the House side for another great woman, Rosa DeLauro.
Oh, yeah.
And I was her press secretary and then her chief of staff. And then when the chance arose for me to come back to the Hill for Jeanne Shaheen from my home state, it just felt like it was fated, you know?
Right.
My dad had that job, and I'd never really imagined that I would have that job, but it was sort of the perfect fit, and I have loved it. It's been great. I've been there 10 years now, and not only working for a great senator who's just a joy to work for because she's just everything you want in a public servant,
Right.
like serious, hardworking,
Yeah.
compassionate, all of those things. But working for my home state is really fun.
That's really cool. So you still have lots of family back in New Hampshire then too, right?
I do. So I'm seventh of 8 kids. So I have lots of family, lots of nieces and nephews. They run the gamut from, I think, age 13 to 40 now. I mean, so it's there's a lot of Keefes around New Hampshire.
Well, and it's an exciting time right now this year as we get to embark in the presidential election with, I think our latest count is 35 people considering it.
Something like that.
Right? So I bet people are leaning on you all, especially with the senator and all, a lot for the New Hampshire primary, right?
Yeah, and it's sort of fun. So, because I'm working for Senator Shaheen, and there are a lot of candidates in the Senate, as we know.
Really?
I've sort of been like Switzerland and offering everybody advice if they want it, and people who want to work on campaigns in New Hampshire have been coming to me and saying, I like candidate X, and would you connect me? And that's always fun, particularly if it's sort of young people who, may have been, a field operative in their first campaign when you met them 6 years ago, and now they're going to be like a comms director or something.
That's so awesome.
It's really fun to sort of watch people, climb the ladder in campaigns, and New Hampshire's a great proving ground, obviously.
So talk to me a little bit. You've been the chief of staff for 10 years, been active in politics basically your whole life, right? So what has it been like for women during that period? I think for me, I see it get a little easier. Do you agree? And how has that changed over the period of time in your career?
I absolutely do. And the thing I always think about is when I got the job of chief of staff for Rosa DeLauro, the title that had been used for many years, even back to my father's day, was administrative assistant.
Right.
And a problem arose when women started moving into the top position, and the name of the position was administrative assistant because people started assuming they were secretaries. Right. And so I actually went to Rosa, like up until I got the job, that was the title that was used. And I said, I can't have this title because people think I'm your secretary and I want the title of chief of staff. And so we changed the title in that office. And you see now that all of the offices have switched over. And I think a lot of that has to do with women rising into that position.
That's awesome. That is true. I remember people being called in politics AA, and it was always weird to me because I always thought, well, what is that? Is that like a secretary secretary or chief. So
yeah,
that's terrific. And so you've worked for Rosa and you've worked for Senator Shaheen. Have you always worked for strong women? It seems is that your special MO?
That's my thing. That's my thing.
Awesome.
I've worked on campaigns for various people, but my 2 positions in Congress have been for 2 women, and I think that people look at Rosa DeLauro and Jeanne Shaheen and might think they don't have a lot in common stylistically,
right?
But they have a lot in common in terms of what they fight for, and I think that to me that teaches me an enormously important lesson, which is that there are a lot of different ways to be effective.
Right.
And they have different styles, but they care about the same things, and they're both tremendously effective women leaders.
Yeah, they sure are, and their styles are very, very different. And I think that's really what's exciting about both of them. They do get a lot done, but it proves that, you don't have to be a certain type to be a woman leader, right?
Exactly.
And so that's what makes it so special. That's why it's so important we get more and more people in these positions, right?
Yeah, very true.
So say someone is coming up through politics, these young people that are interested in getting involved on campaigns. What's your advice, particularly to women?
So this time of year, this time of the cycle, basically everybody who comes to me, I go get on a presidential campaign because there's just nowhere you'll learn as quickly as on a presidential campaign. And with this many campaigns out there, you're going to get in and you're going to find yourself doing a lot of things. You may be hired as an assistant, and next thing you know, you're pretty much the press secretary because they don't have a press secretary,
right.
or you're staffing the principal because they need somebody to go to this event, and the principal takes a liking to you and says this person's really smart, and gets how to do a lot of things and knows how to take care of the needs of what we need to happen at events and that sort of thing, and you'll just get incredible experience and the ability to sort of move on to your next thing from there is just incredible. I mean, the people I've seen come out of the New Hampshire primary and then, they're at the podium in the White House 2 years later. It's crazy.
It is wild to watch, especially I bet when you see that on those early states. Like you were just answering the phone,
exactly,
right?
Yeah.
And now you're running this department and it's really fun. I mean, to think that's what I think is really exciting about government is how many young people are in it and how committed they are and how they'll work just wild hours. You have to love all of that, right? And the stories of folks coming out of Iowa and New Hampshire are a cadre of people, even if they don't necessarily are in different campaigns, they all have stories together, which is really special.
Yeah, and you form bonds that are incredible. No matter what happens to your campaign, if there's 10 campaigns, only one of them is going to be the nominee. But everybody's going to wind up working for that nominee at some point. But you all come out of these various camps and being in the trenches together, you have incredible stories and you form lifelong friendships, and it's really fun. And you can't really do it the rest of your life, so do it while you're young.
Right. So
you don't have your mortgage and you can hopscotch from state to state for a year. It's fantastic.
That's great advice. So say someone is interested in a political campaign. There's all these candidates, right? Mm-hmm. Should they decide, I'm really about this certain candidate, or say there's a couple of them they might be interested in? How do they go about, to your point, how would they pick who they'd like to go work for? Anybody that'll take them, or?
I think some people really have in their mind who they want to work for and what type of issues they care about, and that's great. But not everybody does. And frankly, we've got some fantastic candidates lining up this year. And so if you haven't made up your mind, think about what kind of position you want. Think about what you want to do afterwards. Mm-hmm. Are you interested in working in the Senate afterwards? Are you interested in working for a governor? That might influence what you do. Somebody from your home state, somebody not from your home state. So there are all sorts of things that can go into that decision. But most people who've been coming to me have an idea of who they like. And, some of them are trying to handicap the race. And I'm just saying, I've been at this a long time. I have no idea who the nominee is.
Completely.
Nobody
agree.
knows who the nominee is going to be. So, don't try to do it. Don't try to pick the nominee because you'll be unsuccessful probably. Pick the person who, moves you. You feel is speaking to what you believe the future of the country needs to be about, and then you won't make a bad choice.
I'm so glad you said that. That's the same advice I've been giving people because I've noticed folks want to say, well, I think they're got a better chance, and I was like, this is going to be wild. If you're going to go get on one of these campaigns, do it because you love the person and you believe in the person.
Yeah.
More than that. Because I think, again, it's a tough row to be doing this work for a year in these states, right?
It is. It's hard. But, I always think for me, for like, the Dean campaign, he didn't become the nominee, but I felt passionate about going on that campaign because of his stance on the war in Iraq.
Right.
I never regretted it. It was a wild ride. I still admire him to this day, and forged friendships that I will, never forget on that campaign, and learned a lot of lessons about how these things go and ways you can do it better. And it was a great experience, and I don't regret it a single day.
Yeah, that's great. That's exactly right. So thanks for sharing that advice with folks. Tell me, now that you're on the Hill, in a really important position for the future of our country, how's it been these past 2 years with such a tough person in the White House?
Yeah,
I'm trying to be as kind as possible.
I know you're doing a good job. Pulling your punches. So it's weird because Senator Shaheen got elected with President Obama. So they came in to Washington at the same time. Yeah. We got to experience that full 8 years in, sort of real time, like learning the ropes, like the first exciting piece of legislation you pass, all of that together, which was so exciting. So now we have to, live in the underworld, the underside, which is the world of opposites, and just trying to figure out how to limit damage, get a few things done, protect what progress you've made, is a full-time job. And obviously a lot of that effort and in the Democratic Party has been about health care and protecting the gains that we made and trying to build on them, as the president and his allies have tried to overturn the healthcare law and sort of undermine that progress. I think we got a resounding verdict from the American people in the 2018 election where they stand on that issue.
Right.
And I think we need to continue to not only talk about that issue, but legislate and make improvements to lower costs and make sure that more people have health care.
Right. Do you find that you have to use different leadership skills based on when you have friends in different places to get things done versus the part where you have to be more defensive, like kind of offense versus defense? Yeah.
It was sort of a sea change, both for my own sort of headspace, but also as a manager in an office most of the staff, the younger staff in my office in particular, but almost all of my staff had never served in Congress with the Republican president, right? So they were just sort of feeling completely under siege, particularly at the beginning of the Trump administration. And, we really had to do a lot of sort of meetings where we kind of talked through what people were feeling and what we were hearing from people on the phone and how upset people were and how to deal with that.
Right.
Because, it's been a long couple of years of sort of watching things that we worked on and fought for sort of getting undercut and, reversed, and that's really hard.
Very, very painful. And, it's affecting real people's lives every day in communities like Dayton. So
absolutely.
Thanks for what you're doing there to fight. keep the resistance up. Yeah. So this podcast is called Carry As You Climb, and I'm really proud and thankful for Connie Schultz, who we had dinner once, and she talked about how, as women, because there's not a lot of women leaders, we have to keep on climbing the ladder, but we have to carry other women up with us. Can you talk a little bit of people that helped carry you up this ladder?
Yeah. Well, I have to start really with Rosa, my first boss on the Hill. And while I had sort of worked on campaigns and been around campaigns, I hadn't worked on the Hill before, and I had a lot to learn. I thought I knew a lot, but it turned out I didn't. Funny thing.
Many of us.
Yeah, exactly. And she was just a great mentor and friend, and as she was my boss, and sort of showing me the ropes and having faith in me and getting me and showing me how to get at the table. which is something she's very good at, and not being afraid to fight for your place at the table. I watched that, and I learned a lot. And she has continued to be a mentor of mine. And, I count Jeanne as a mentor as well. Yeah. And Jeanne has, as I said, they have very different styles. And, the thing I think I've learned from Jeanne, which sort of fits as I have matured, maybe fits my style now as well, which is really how to play the long game and how to make sure that you have that end goal in mind and kind of slowly and deliberately work your way there. And that's what she does really well.
And that's really hard.
It is.
For some, especially in politics, because I'm very impatient. So to do that is such a skill.
It is.
Such a skill.
It is. And, I have my Irish temper, and I'm like ready to go sometimes. And she'll always sort of say like, no, because like we still got to do this. And so let's think about it. So that's been great for me to sort of have those role models in my life every day. I worked for Rosa for about 7 years, and I've been with Jeanne for 10. So how lucky am I?
That's really terrific. And to work for such great women. I mean, that doesn't happen very often in this work, Maura. So talk to me a little bit about who you've helped carry up that you're really proud of the work that you can say, hey, I had a play in that.
Yeah. I certainly with the Chiefs of Staff group, I chair the sort of weekly meeting that we have with the Democratic Chiefs of Staff, and have done that now for 7 years. And in that role, I really try to welcome all of the new chiefs and sit down with them and be a resource for them, but particularly working with some of the women chiefs, and have been an advocate for women chiefs. And in fact, becoming chair of that group is because the way I became chair of that group is the person who had been chairing it for years left the Hill, and it was sort of very murky about how his replacement was going to be chosen. And this is so funny. So I'm in the gym in the morning, and a bunch of 3 other women chiefs of staff who are also in the gym come up to me and they go, we want you to have that job. So we're going to them and we're saying, it's time for a woman to have this job, and we want it to be Maura. And how do you feel about that? I was like, well, I don't know. I mean, do you really think I should do it? And they were like, yes, you need to do this. So they did that for me, and I've always remembered that. And sometimes you have to join forces to get what you need. Another example is, and this is on, when you're a chief of staff, you also have to do a lot of the politics, including fundraising, and we have to do that. And I started along with 3 other women chiefs at the time, like 6 or 7 years ago. We started a women's dinner. So it's the women chiefs of staff and sort of women in leadership positions in D.C. who come together and do an annual dinner. And it's become such a fun event. And
I've heard about it, yes.
Yeah,
it's a big deal.
You should come to town for it.
I'll try to. That would be really fun.
It's super fun. And so, just doing those sorts of things. And that's a way to elevate, women who are in nonprofits, women who are in think tanks, women who have, been on the Hill as staffers and then moved on to other positions in government relations or public relations or whatever it is, and are really succeeding. And a way for us to showcase them and also the women chiefs at the same time.
That's really cool. Oh, well, thanks for your great leadership and bringing other women along. That's really awesome.
Thanks.
Okay, so now, even though you're from New Hampshire, and you've probably been through Ohio because it does have a lot to do with presidential politics. I always like to ask people, because I'm very firmly about my state.
Exactly.
When you think of Ohio, what do you think of?
The Ohio State University.
Oh, that'll be very popular here.
You know why?
Why?
Because the new coach of the Ohio State University, Ryan Day, is from Manchester, New Hampshire.
Oh, there you go. The connection.
He was a quarterback at UNH and a coach at UNH. But more importantly, my mother and his grandmother are like best friends.
Oh, wonderful.
And so I go home, like the last couple of years as he's been like the assistant coach.
Right.
I go home and I would hear my mom on Saturdays calling her friend Joan and saying, now what time is Ryan on? is Ryan's team playing today? And she'd say, yeah. And she'd get it and she'd say, Maura, she'd write it down and tell me, make sure I'm watching TV at this time. So
is that going to make you a Buckeye fan?
I have to be.
All right.
It's required, and so I'm official.
Oh, great. Well, we'll look forward to seeing you in Columbus at the Horseshoe for some big games.
Absolutely.
It's quite an experience.
I would love it, actually.
Oh, yeah, we'll definitely have you. They'll be very excited. That'll be great. So.
I grew up in a house with 6 brothers, so I've watched a lot of football, and I like football, and now, I have a personal connection. So
that's so cool. I'm excited to hear it.
Yeah.
Hear it. And then finally, who is your favorite woman leader of all time?
All right, don't consider this a cop-out, but I'm going with my mom.
All right, no, that's fair.
Mother of 8.
Yeah.
8 C-sections, by the way.
Are you serious?
Yeah. So,
wow.
Little powerhouse, who says things to me now like, I don't know how you do your job, and I'm like, Mom, you could have done it with your eyes closed.
That's amazing.
You know what I mean? Managing a house with 8 kids, and she's a politico in her own right. And whenever I go home to New Hampshire, I know I have to watch Rachel Maddow for a couple of nights to make sure that my mother doesn't catch me flat-footed on something that I should know about.
I know what you're talking about. There's a lot of folks like that in my life. So that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, I'm so grateful for the time you took to come here. Thank you, Maura, and thanks for all you do for women and for democracy and for the movement. It matters to people even in Dayton, Ohio.
Well, thank you, and thanks for all you do as a woman leader and as a mayor, chief executive. I'm glad that you had time to come here. I know you have a busy life.
Thanks. Have a great one.
All right. Bye.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Carry As You Climb. Make sure to follow us on Twitter at CarryClimbPod. Also, visit our website at carryasyouklimbpod.com to sign up for our latest updates. Also, please subscribe and rate us on wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts.